Welcome to Systems Alliance. My name is Jexy, and in this video, we're going to go ahead and take a look at this weekend's box office report, where it's a little similar to last week, with Toy Story 4 finishing number 2 again, and Spider-Man Far From Home holding on to the number 1 spot. So coming in at number 1 this weekend, dropping 51%, finishing with $45.3 million, is Sony's and I guess Disney's, Marvel's Spider-Man Far From Home. The $45.3 million that Spider-Man Far From Home brought in this weekend domestically brings its domestic total up to $274.5 million. Now, it also brought in $100 million from overseas markets, and that brought its international total up to $572.5 million. So a massive total there, and if you don't factor in for inflation, it's the highest total for any Spider-Man movie, but it doesn't quite come close to any of the original ones once you do factor in for inflation. Of that 572 plus million internationally, 192 million is actually from China and around 50 million is from South Korea. So it is playing well in the Asian markets, and that should definitely help boost Spider-Man to go past that billion-dollar mark. Indonesia's even up there at 16 million. So with only a $160 million budget, it's definitely going to be raking in the cash for Marvel, Sony, Disney, and it kind of needs to, because all those profits are going to be split between the two studios, Sony and Disney. In total, it stands at $847 million. So this movie, especially with just a $160 million budget, which is pretty low for something that is this heavy CG, but it's actually on pace to not only reach $1 billion, but definitely go over. And as I said in a previous video, we'll just have to see how it stacks up versus the original 3 Spider-Man movies. As I mentioned, with those original 3, they stand adjusted for inflation somewhere between $1.1 and $1.3 billion. So obviously, after 2 weeks of release, at least domestically, and maybe 2.5 in foreign markets, it's looking pretty good for Spider-Man. I mean, it could definitely at least pass 1.1 billion. Will it reach 1.3? It's a little tougher. Not sure it's going to get there. It's going to have some decent legs. This was only the first weekend drop, so obviously we're expecting it to hold on a little bit better come next weekend in order to at least reach anywhere close to that 1.3 billion, but we'll just have to see. Either way, a smash hit for all the studios involved and another Marvel success. Now, coming in number 2 yet again, as I mentioned, is Toy Story 4, and that's in its 4th week of release. Now, it's holding pretty strong, dropping just 39% to finish with $20.6 million. And that puts its domestic total over $346 million. So, once again, another smash hit for Disney and Pixar. And I have noticed over the past couple days that it's still ahead of the pace of Toy Story 3, but not by that much. It's used to be a lot bigger, and now it's narrowing. So will it hit 400 million? Yeah. How much further than 400 million will it get? We'll just have to see how it holds in the upcoming weeks. Now, Toy Story 4 also added in 48.1 million from international markets, and that total now stands at 424.7 million. Globally, Toy Story 4 is now at $771 million. So once again, huge smash hit. And as I mentioned in a previous video, the international rollout for Pixar movies is always a little bit slower. So while it is pacing ahead of several other Pixar movies that did hit $1 billion, this one, you never quite know where they're going to end up. Is it going to hit $1 billion? Yes, of course. When? It could be a couple weeks from now. And how far will it go? Will it end up being one of the top grossers of Pixar overall? Maybe. I mean, you got your Toy Story 3, you have your Finding Dory and Finding Nemo, and you have your Incredibles 2. Which ones of those is it going to reach or pass? We'll just have to see, but still, another big hit, especially considering a $200 million budget. It's still making a ton of profit for Disney and Pixar. Now, coming in at number 3 this weekend is Paramount's horror movie Crawl. Crawl finished with 12 million domestically and 4.8 million internationally, so its total now stands at $16.8 million. Its production budget is listed at $13.5 million, so will this movie end up making a profit? I think so, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be a ton unless its international rollout is a lot slower than expected. A lot of times these horror movies don't get released in all the international markets, especially if they're starting out this small, but it looks like it's going to be a little profitable, but nothing crazy for the studio. But still, a solid opening weekend for this movie with that kind of budget. Because when you think about it, if it already made its budget back in the first weekend, then hey, it's got a pretty good shot of making money overall. Now, coming in fourth place is Fox's action comedy Stuber. Now, of course, this is actually released by Disney because they now own Fox. Domestically, it brought in $8 million, and internationally, it brought in $3 million. So only $11 million opening. The budget is listed at $16 million, so it brought in 11. Will this one make money? I'm not sure. Well, it's definitely going to have legs, or at least a larger release internationally for it to do so. Once you factor in marketing and all of that stuff, this one's going to come pretty close. As I mentioned with the other one, in its opening release worldwide, it was already more than its budget. This one's less. So a little bit more uncertain, but still wouldn't be a huge disappointment for the studio if it broke even or something like that, given it's still a relatively small budget. Now, coming in fifth, dropping just 33% in its third week in release, finishing with $6.75 million, is Universal's movie Yesterday. Yesterday also brought in $7.8 million from international markets this weekend, and its global total now stands at over $80 million. Now, with a $26 million budget, this movie is already making money for the studio, so a solid movie. Nothing's going crazy with this one compared to the other ones based on music or anything like that, but still, 80 plus million is a solid total to bring in when your budget's 26 million. And before I go, I still want to address Avengers Endgame, because it's still tracking to become the #1 movie worldwide of all time if you don't factor in for inflation. Now, as of last weekend, it was about $16 or so million off from Avatar. And it obviously was losing theaters, not bringing in nearly as much money. But something happened this weekend which 100% makes me feel like it will pass Avatar. And part of it is, the domestic, which did bring in 1.7 million this weekend. And it's like, okay, well, that's going to take a while for it to get to that Avatar level if you're 16 million short. Well, what happened is the international markets. So in between updating my last week's international total with this week, I added about $5 million. And that's a pretty big chunk. Once you take that and then also add in the weekday total that it was bringing in domestically, it doesn't stand too far away now from Avatar's total. Avengers Endgame now stands at $2,780.8 million. Avatar is at $2,788 million, and that's the total that Avengers Endgame needs to get, which means it needs just $7.2 more million to go. And if it already brought in that total from this week, I'm going to say within the next 2 weeks and almost guaranteed the next 3 weeks, it will pass that total. Obviously, it's going to be fighting other big openings that are coming up. Obviously, it's going to be losing theater count, but if you're talking the whole world and it just needs to beat that much, Disney's going to keep it in theaters. So I can definitely say at this point that Avatar will end up being #2, and Avengers Endgame will end up being the #1 movie worldwide of all time, not factoring in for inflation. So huge for Marvel, Disney, everyone involved. The way it opened, you would have expected it to reach the #1 movie of all time unadjusted, but it had a little adventure getting there. But we could definitely say now it's going to be the #1 movie all time worldwide, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Obviously, it wasn't re-released, but it was just pushed out into more theaters as its regular cycle was winding down. Do you think that that's the right way to do it? Are you kind of upset the way they did it? Do you think it would do it anyway? Someone left in my comment section the other week, they think Avatar is going to get a re-release. So let me know if you think that's going to happen. Personally, I'm not too sure if James Cameron cares about that. Maybe he's just too busy working on these other Avatar sequels to begin with. But who knows? I mean, maybe they do push it out because it's been so long since the last Avatar movie. I mean, granted, I've seen it a bunch of times. I remember what happens, but it's been a long time. That's a huge gap between sequels. So are people going to forget what happened in the first Avatar? Do you need a refresher? And if so, does that mean it's going to be pushed out so everyone can see it? Also interesting in that is that was a Fox movie. Fox is owned by Disney now. So is Disney going to say, hey, this Fox movie that was pushed out, even though we own it now, it still has the Fox label on it because when it was released, it was not Disney, it was Fox. Are we going to make a Fox movie the #1 movie of all time? Or does Disney want to keep a Disney movie at #1 all time? I think that's going to factor in, and that's why I don't think that it's going to be re-released. But You never know. Like I said, it has been a while. Audiences probably could use a refreshment on it. Whether they do that or not, we'll just have to see. But let me know your thoughts on Avengers Endgame and Avatar. So that wraps up the Avengers update, and that wraps up the top 5 for this weekend's box office. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Let me know what you think about Spider-Man Toy Story, where they're going to end up. Are they both going to crack $1 billion? How much further than $1 billion do they get? Let me know your thoughts if you've seen any of the other ones that just opened up, like Crawl or Stuber. And let me know your thoughts on yesterday. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, hit me up on Twitter, and we'll catch you next time.